You're listening to KDKR, Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, and KYJC Commerce.
Portions of KDKR's daily programming do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, simple money, rich life. Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, how to have a simple money, rich life. Today my special guest is Bob Lotich. He is host of a great podcast, as well as author of a book you're going to want to read. It's called Simple Money, Rich Life. Bob, welcome to Prudent Money.
Bob, thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
I got to tell you something that happened that's very unusual, and in doing radio for 20 years, never has happened before. Bob, 2 listeners within the span of 3 days sent me an email. One was from a gentleman up in the New England area, and one was the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and said, you got to have this guy on the program. You got to interview Bob on your program. So I think that we were supposed to have this interview, and I've been looking forward to it, to talk a little stewardship and make sure that my listeners are aware of your podcast and the great book, Simple Money, Rich Life.
Yeah, that's crazy. I had no idea. That's really fun how that worked out.
Well, when I come across somebody that shares the same passion of stewardship that I have, I always want to know where it came from and want to know the backstory. So talk a little bit about what led up to the start of your ministry.
Yeah, so for me, it all started really down in Florida. I was kind of on a sabbatical as a young 20-something and kind of found myself at my financial breaking point with my car broken down as I was living off of a credit card, eating boxes of macaroni and cheese to survive, and reached this point where I realized that I need help with money. Like the plan that I had was not working out very well. And so that was the point where I just kind of cried out to God, and I'm like, Lord, I don't know what I don't know. I thought I had this figured out, but clearly my way isn't working. So if you have a better path, like I'm ready to listen. I'm ready to hear whatever it is you have to say. And that was kind of where the whole thing kicked off for me on my financial journey.
You know, I was watching the trailer for your book, and you made the comment that people just don't really like talking about money. It's one thing that you've learned through the years. And, you know, I couldn't agree more. And it's a real problem because of the importance of understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it. And that's the only way you're going to know if I'm on the right track and following God's stewardship will for your life. Very important.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the thing that most people don't think about when they try to avoid money conversations is that there's plenty of other things that they do want to talk about, that the money conversations are actually going to lead them in that direction, you know. And so, you know, like we'll talk about, I mean, I think part of our big calling is to be able to give, and we want to be able to give significant amounts of money away. It's just something that's been on my heart for decades. But even if the thing is, you know, providing a better life for your kids, or being able to send your kids to college, or being able to travel, like even if it's something like that, the money discussions are the things that are going to help move you in that direction. So that's why I think it's just very odd to not talk about money, because these are the things that help us get towards those things that are important to us.
You know, I want to talk about a comment you made in the book. Lack of financial education, of course, is, and we talk about it all the time, Bob, real problem in this country. A bigger problem that you point out is from where you get it. You wrote that our money education comes from all the wrong places. Very interesting. Talk about that.
Yeah, so, you know, I've just found this a lot with our listeners or our readers, that I keep hearing the same thing. Like, my dad said that we didn't talk about money in our house. And so it begs the question, all right, where are you learning about money from? And I think so much of our society has created their beliefs about money and their education about money, their financial education, if you will, from all the wrong sources. And so this might be credit card companies, this might be Instagram influencers, this might be any number of things, celebrities. And so even if, you know, all these sources, you know, the influencers or celebrities aren't like specifically teaching us about money, like if we're watching them and there's no financial education filling that void, then we're going to let that be the de facto financial education. Like the celebrities are watching how they spend money, how they're making decisions, or whatever, Instagram influencers, or you name it, whatever the thing might be. Or again, like the credit card commercials, like any of these things are shaping our beliefs if we don't have something of more substance in there already filling that void. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, the book is based on a 4-part formula. Give us the formula for a better life with money, just in general.
Yeah, so this came from a John Wesley quote that my wife Linda and I have really tried to make our guiding principle for our financial life, really for about 15 years now. And it's a John Wesley quote that goes something like this. It's, I seek to earn all I can. You know, he was a writer and he was a speaker. I seek to earn all I can and reduce my expenses as much as I can by, cutting out wasteful spending. And the purpose is so that I can give as much as I possibly can. And so that's kind of been something that's been really important to us. But one other component that we wanted to add to that was just that we could enjoy it all. Like, because I've been in jobs that I just was absolutely miserable in and hated doing. And I've been in situations, and especially my wife would say, there's been many times where she hated saving money and hated having to cut back or anything like that. And then a lot of us can relate to just not having any joy with giving. And I believe that we can enjoy each of those three things. And I think that's when we have the healthiest financial life, is when we actually are enjoying all three of those things.
Bob, I want to make sure that listeners know about your podcast. It's a great podcast. It's seedtime.com. And you can go check out all the Bob's information and resources on the website. I really did appreciate something you said about in the book, and this is all my words, not your words. You said you were not here to yell at anyone or make anyone feel bad or judge you about the decisions that they are making about money. So often financial how-to books or the quote-unquote gurus of financial media do just that. They make you feel bad for the decisions that you made. When we're just all looking to find a better way with this whole relationship with money. I mean, it's complicated.
Yeah. I mean, and I think anyone who's honest knows that there's no one-size-fits-all solution for money, and we're all different people. Personal finance is personal. And so everybody's situation is unique. And I think, the road that we've taken, with the book and with anything that we're doing, we're trying to start a conversation, and we're trying to say, all right, these are some things we've seen that might be helpful, but let's pray and ask God and see what's going to make the most sense for your situation. Because sometimes two completely opposite paths make sense for different people, and one thing might be right for one person and wrong for the other, and vice versa. So, and I know that makes it a little bit more, it just takes a little more time when there's not just one plain and simple set of rules that everyone must abide by. But if we look throughout the Bible, there's things that need to be sorted out and figured out. And I just don't think it's any different with our finances. So I think the best thing we can do is just have honest conversations about our situations and prayerfully seek God on how we should move forward financially.
Well, and this is, I also really like the one-size-fits-all approach, because we talk about this a lot, Bob, on the program, and that's what I call pop culture finance. They preach is that you just do 1 + 2 + 3 always equals 6, versus 2 + 2 sometimes equals 6, sometimes equals 7, sometimes equals 4. Things are very different. Everybody's situation is different, but it's almost kind of like, look, just follow this road and don't think about it. And you really have to think and understand where you are individually and how money affects you in your life.
Yeah, no, completely. And I think there's a lot of people, and I think my wife would say this, I would say this in my early years, where I just didn't want to think about money. And but once I had that breaking point moment for me, it's like, all right, I need to think about it. Things have gotten bad enough that I need to think about it. And I'm really thankful for that moment, because a lot of people just kind of float by doing okay financially, and they miss out on the opportunity to thrive financially. And again, like what we talk about in the book, or John Wesley in that quote, the idea is that there's a purpose behind our thriving financially. Like, as we move forward financially, we can impact the kingdom. Like we can affect people's lives around us. Like we can change situations, for God's glory. And that just gets me really excited. So I'm really thankful that I had that moment where I was kind of forced to start thinking about money.
I want to mention that, and I love this, that Linda does the podcast with you, and she's such a big part of the ministry. Yeah, I was thinking about, as I was reading through some of your information today, I was thinking about what my wife told me one time. She came into my office and said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm preparing for a seminar, a talk. She looks at me and she goes, boy, I hope you're not going to bore people with all that information about bulls and bears and all that kind of thing. And it was so great that our wives keep us so grounded and keep things simple, which is tough to do sometimes.
Yeah, no, I'm really thankful. Like within the last couple of years, Linda has kind of become a more integral part of our business, and things have just gotten better since she's been around. And I think part of that is because she's really good, because there's that curse of knowledge of once you're around a subject for so long that it becomes hard to remember what it was like at the beginning. And she's really good at pulling things back and keeping them in their most basic form. And so, the combination has been really good for us, and it's been good for our readers and listeners who we've been talking to as well.
Well, let's start with saving. You write that most people think that to save more, you have to earn more. However, that is not the case. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that, sometimes I go through a case study of Mike Tyson, and the guy earned $30 million for a single fight, over $400 million over his career in the mid-'90s, but yet by 2003, his net worth was negative $23 million. And so it's like, clearly the amount we earn is not, the only determining factor of how much we're going to have. And then on the other hand, you have, guys like Ronald Reed and a handful of others who, are media stars, or not media stars, but glamorized in the media because, Ronald Reed had a janitor, had a lifetime salary of a janitor and had about $8 million when he died. And so, then we see that side where it's like, okay, clearly it's not just about how much money we make. So there has to be something with how we're managing it. And, and the old adage that we can't spend more than we're earning. And if we do, we're going backwards. So yeah, that's such an important part because it's a whole lot less about how much we make and so much more about what we do with it. So that really becomes the first part to get that set up, because then as you increase your income, you'll actually have something that you can do with it rather than just being squandered away.
I got to tell you, that's the one thing that I wish that was drilled into my head when I graduated from college and got into my career, is that you've got to live within your means, not what you think your means are going to be 10 years down the road.
Yep.
It's such a powerful concept. Simple concept, but powerful concept so many folks don't get.
Yep.
Talking to Bob Lotich about a great book, Simple Money, Rich Life. If you want more information about the book, I would definitely encourage you to read this book. Go to seedtime.com. You can also get information about the podcast as well. Your book speaks to those who are in over their head, who have accumulated massive amounts of debt beyond hope. And I like what you write. You write to let God fight your financial battle. Speak to that.
Yeah, I think too often, especially in the church, we have a lot of people who want to take one of two paths. And so they'll either take this path of, I'm going to do all the financially wise things. I'm going to try to spend less than I earn. I'm going to try to pay off my debt. I'm going to try to do, and a lot of this is biblical wisdom, just follow the biblical wisdom about managing money. And so we have a lot of people who do that. And then on the other side, or in that category of doing the financially wise things, they won't pray, but they will just do that. On the other side, we have a lot of people who choose not to do any of the financially wise things, but they will pray, and they will sometimes see God do miracles in their financial lives. And so what we've endeavored, and where we've seen the biggest miracles in our financial life, is when we combine both of those two together, because there seems to be a really big divide where a lot of the church wants to be in one camp or the other. And we're all for, let's combine them. Let's do the wisdom. Let's follow the wisdom throughout Scripture about how to manage our money wisely. But then let's also believe God that he can do miracles in our lives that are exceedingly abundantly above and beyond all we can ask or think. And so that combination has led to some really fascinating things we've seen in our lives and some of our readers and listeners as well.
Yeah, people are so surprised when you tell them, when they talk about their financial situation, that how things are in bad shape, and you ask them, well, have you prayed about it? Well, no, I haven't prayed about it. Not even considering that God really wants to be a part of that. Linda added something in the book that she wrote that said, so show up, do your part, and watch the deliverance of the Lord. And we got her. That's so very important. I'm glad you speak to it about showing up and doing your part, because it's critical to get back onto that road again and get to where you need to be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reminded of James, where he talks about faith without works is dead. And so just something about this combination of co-laboring with God, like us showing up and doing our part, but at the same time, while being expectant for him to show up and do his part. And so, and if you go back to Jesus feeding the 5,000 and that whole miracle, it's like you have, this boy, these loaves and fishes, bringing this little that he has that is completely insufficient for the task. Like there's no way that it could amount to anything, but that's where they had to start. They had to start with what was in their hand, and as they passed it out in faith, that's when the miracle happened. And so we have that same opportunity to take whatever we're dealing with financially right now, whatever little amount that we have, but to basically line up with God, like get in agreement, say, Lord, this is what I have. Help me to move forward. Like, will you help me in this? I'm going to do my part by passing it out, or however the analogy goes. But I'm trusting you to do the real miracle here.
You talk about in the book about determining your AUM. Define what you mean by that and describe that process.
Yeah. So one of the things that we mentioned net worth just a few minutes ago. It's a term that net worth I think is fantastic. We've been using it to track our progress for years and years. And somewhere along the line, I realized I don't really like that term, and I don't like continuing to label myself and say that my net worth is this number. And
Sure.
I think there's some people who feel really good about themselves because they have a high net worth, and there's people who feel really bad about themselves because they have a low net worth. And so we determined that we're going to change this term for us and call it our assets under management, to get rid of the net worth label that we're putting on ourselves, but then more importantly, to have a constant reminder that everything in our possession is that these are just assets that are temporarily entrusted to us by God that we are managing for him and for his purposes and his glory. And that helps me to not have such a tight grip on everything that's in our bank account or our investments. Just knowing that if he asks me, hey, I'd like you to give a big chunk of that money over here, or go open, a shelter over here, like whatever the thing might be, it helps me to kind of keep a looser grip on it when I constantly am reminding myself that this is assets under management. These are God's assets that we are managing.
Yeah, it is such a shift when you look at it through that filter that I'm just here to do. It's my responsibility to manage everything that I have, which is everything God's given me, down to relationships, time, and assets. Yep. Now, you say in the book that you like to track debt using AUM. Define what you mean by that.
I'm sorry. Would you? I missed part of that question. You said
okay.
Tracking debt with AUM.
You said that one of the things we always talk about on the program is keeping up with debt and tracking it. You say that using AUM is more effective. Describe what you mean by that.
Oh yeah. So, when we were paying off, we had $46,000 of credit card debt and a couple other things rolled up in there. And I remember going through that process because at that point we began kind of tracking our net worth at that point. And as we were doing it, we were also trying to pay off our debt. And I realized that it's just more encouraging to track, net worth, or AUM is what we call it now, because any good financial decision that we make is moving that needle. It's moving us forward faster. So, if we just spend less money, if we add some money to a 401k, if we, just put some in a savings account, like any of these things are all moving that down the line. Whereas when we're just tracking our debt payoff, it's just not moving as fast. And so for me, I'm such a visual person, and so those needles moving really encourage me and move me forward a lot faster. So we found that to be really, really helpful. And just for us, just a little bit better tracker or tracking tool of our financial progress than just tracking debt, you know. And the other part is that even after you pay off debt, like you can still keep going, you know. So there's a life after financial debt. You can continue to track your progress.
Last question, Bob. You know, there's a lot of people struggling with things like the stock market being down, high inflation, debt, just general financial poor health that might be at a position where they're giving up and don't have much hope. What advice would you give somebody like that?
Yeah, I mean, we're in a crazy time right now. I mean, right, everything you mentioned, and I think it's really, it's an interesting time. But at the end of the day, if we're believers, like we have confidence that God is bigger than all of this stuff, and that Philippians 4:19 is true and always will be true, that my God shall supply all of your need according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus. And when we can lean into that, and we can trust that, and we can know that he's always going to provide for our needs, and that he's going to be faithful in season, out of season, and that the economy, like this doesn't affect any of that. And it's easy to lose sight of this. But again, my encouragement would be is to continue meditating on that truth and other truths in the Word, and let that be where you're fixing your eyes more than on the latest news report, because all the news cycle wants to do is just get us in fear and get us in panic about everything that's going on. Meanwhile, God he's not afraid. He's not freaked out by it. So I think that's one of the best things that we can do in these crazy times is to keep our eyes fixed on the truth.
I got about a minute left. I want you to tell the listeners about Seed Time and the podcast.
Sure. Yeah. So my wife and I, Linda, we started a podcast probably a few years ago now, and and we're just sharing everything we've learned on our journey. A lot of things to talk about in the book. We share some of the strategies, some of the principles, but we also get into the dirty tactics. And I love getting into the tactics and money-saving tools and tips and hacks and all that stuff as well.
Well, listen, congratulations on the book and the podcast, Simple Money, Rich Life. Bob, it was a pleasure to have you on the program today.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I really appreciate it.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Once again, the name of that book is Simple Money, Rich Life. And I had the opportunity to listen to some of Bob's podcasts. Great information, and he is really doing a great ministry with the book and all the resources. Once again, the website is seedtime.com. The name of the book is Simple Money, Rich Life. The thing that I like about it most is it's very down to earth, and it's just the kind of practical advice bathed in stewardship that I think that we're looking for, and to get things back on track. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. If you missed any of the program, you can always go to the website at prudentmoney.com or wherever you listen to your podcast, the major platforms you listen to your podcasts, and listen to the program at your convenience. Starts, though, at prudentmoney.com. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.